Tuesday this week, the top commander of the Nigerian police decided to flout a standing presidential directive on the exemption of essential service providers from a curfew put in place to enforce compliance with COVID-19 guidelines. According to explanations offered by the police hierarchy, after hours of frustration had been visited on the public at police roadblocks by surveillance teams across Lagos, we were told that the action was necessitated by a need within the organization to prove to the public that it had not been responsible for the flouting of the curfew directive as was being alleged. However, this overzealous action by the police seems to have attracted an opposite but equal reaction from various essential workers in Nigeria, including the Nigerian Medical Association in Lagos, which yesterday declared an indefinite strike until such a time that the Lagos State Police Command tenders an unreserved apology to it for harassing medical personnel who were detained and harassed by the police. Joining us this morning to look at this issue and the measures being taken by the police is Dr. Abiodun Adeniyi, Associate Professor and Head of Mass Communication at Baze University, Abuja. Dr. Adeniyi, good morning. Good to have you again on the morning show.
My pleasure, the great Dr. Abati. Good morning, Leila.
Good morning, Dr. Adeniyi.
Good to have you here. Well, I mean, you must have been following the story about what we have just described as the overzealousness of the police. On Tuesday, the police harassed, detained journalists, other essential health workers, essential workers, including healthcare workers, fire servicemen, ambulance drivers, and there has been an outreach among journalists and also other essential service providers. Now, this was contrary to what the president had directed on March 29 when he first addressed the nation, and at no time did the federal government change its position. What could have been responsible for the behavior of the police? Lack of proper communication, lack of coordination, or just an overzealous attempt to prove to Nigerians that they have power? What do you think?
Very well, Dr. Abati. My quick response to that question will just be to say everything you have said is probably responsible for the police action. You know, absence of communication, lack of cohesion, and probably a deliberate refusal to understand the times that we are in. Earlier on, we've been talking about communication. We've been talking about top-down communication, the absence of communication between the top and the down aspect of the community, of the society. But now we are seeing communication even amongst the frontliners, because ordinarily the security agencies will be listed among the frontliners, the way you list the medical practitioners, you know, but there's absolutely no communication between the frontliners as it were, and that's what is resulting into this kind of thing that will say actually beggars belief. And it's unfortunate to see the kind of explanation that the police is giving, absolutely infantile explanation, to the extent that, you know, we want to prove to the public that we're not the ones responsible for the lack of implementation of the initial lockdown. I can't come to terms with that kind of explanation, really. And again, we need to also emphasize the fact that perhaps the presidency will have to be, yes, we have seen them, we are hearing them, but we have to see more action from them. Perhaps if there's a greater action from the center of the presidency, you know, they'll be able to rein in on these agencies to be mindful of the times we're in. It's a time where all hands have to be on deck, you know, and all the arms that we're talking about, it's not just the agencies alone, but of course those who are directly in contact with those who are, infected with the virus, those who are directly responsible, you know, for mitigating, interrupting, and treating all those who are unfortunately infected. And who are these? They are the medical doctors. So in any situation, you should prioritize these people and treat them like kings in this situation. And we see how this is happening all around the world, you know. The UK, for instance, by 8 o'clock, you know, I don't know if they have stopped it now, but of course, 8 o'clock, there's a shutdown, and they applaud all frontliners, you know, and I don't know why we should be different. Rather than celebrating them in our own case, we're rather discouraging them. It's very unfortunate, really, but again, it is what it is. The deed has probably been done. We need to also appeal to the medical doctors, not to scratch the body the way it has been made to itch them. They should also, remember the Hippocratic oath that is signed, that is subscribed to, that they understand very well, and not allow the police or any other agency, for that matter, to bring them down to a level where the society will now come to say that, okay, they are overreacting. We crave for their understanding. Let there be synergy, and our system, our society, should not be made worse for this absence of communication at the height, at the pedestal where communication should ordinarily be perfect. Dr. Bati and Leila.
Thank you, Dr. Adeniyi, for that. And yes, you are right. I recall the last time you were on the show, you spoke about how the biggest problem that we are facing here is to do with the lack of strategic communication. And this is a situation that we are now faced with again. I think it must be pointed out that essential workers have the right to feel the way that they currently do, given what has happened. However, like you said, they shouldn't also be given a reason, or they shouldn't also give in to the itches that they see or that we see. What do you think the right response should have been from the Nigerian Medical Association to what's happened, to the consistent harassment, shall I say, of essential workers across the state and across the country?
Well, I think they don't have any weapon in their hands. They don't have anything with which you can say they will force their paths or their ways through the police barricades. I think what they have done is a rightful thing, coming together through their association and embarking on a strike. But in the circumstance, a strike would just be unthinkable, and that's why we need to appeal to them to be a little bit more restrained. Perhaps they should explore all channels of communication. I'm sure the governor of Lagos State, for instance, has been very proactive, very creative in his responses. I do not think if they seek to engage the governor of Lagos State that he will disregard them or he will discountenance them. I don't see that happening. Then what about the authorities in Abuja? They can also find ways. The health ministry, for that matter, the health minister is a member of the NMA. The NCDC Director General is also a member. They can find ways of engaging these ones and not resort to the extreme measure of strike. Not for the sake of the police, but for the sake of the citizens, Because if they go striking, the police alone will not feel it, but the citizens will suffer it, particularly those who are infected. And we know this health crisis is one that has been adjudged as well as, going to last for a very long time. Nobody knows the definite path to take to survive it. All your efforts are being juggled left, right, and center, and anyone that seems to be deviating, from the focus should be pulled back. And on this note, we need to plead again with the NMA members in Lagos, to just be able to restrain and ask the authorities to come into these controversy and have it resolved amicably in the interest of the Nigerian population. Leila.
Well, with regard to the sit-at-home indefinite strike declared by the Nigerian Medical Association in Lagos, we have it on good authority that Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu and other officials of the Lagos State government have been talking to the NMA, and that perhaps, the strike may have even been called off now. But the thing, of course, is that they needed to take that step, I guess, to prove a point and to prevent a situation whereby security agencies would not, would not continue to harass their members. And I think the same thing perhaps also goes for journalists. I understand that the NUJ has sent a petition to the Inspector General of Police. However, let me ask you another question, and which is about the coming Eid al-Fitr celebration tomorrow. Some states, particularly in the north, Yobe, Katsina, Kaduna, Bauchi, Akano, have all lifted restrictions on religious gatherings. But in Kano, the Council of Ulama says, no, this does not make sense. The Sultan of Sokoto and the Supreme Council of Islamic Affairs also says, no, there should be no large gatherings. People should either pray in their homes or they pray in neighborhood mosques. What do you think should be the right approach? Should we just open up all the worship centers, as is being proposed in many states, based on pressure from religious leaders?
Doc, tricky question, no doubt, but I think we also remember that over time, there's always tension between faith and science, between the state and religion. And like I said somewhere else, and we have seen it manifesting. And it is coming against the background of, Nigeria being a plural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious societies, where all these classifiers conflict at different times. In a crisis like this, we expect it to happen, and it will continue to happen. And we also need to remember that we are a largely religious state, even though it has not impacted, on our economy, on our politics, on our economy, on our morality, and on our ethics. But essentially, we are largely religious. We have patterns and particularities that we've been following over the years, celebrations, Christian celebrations, Muslim celebrations. So anything that will come and disrupt it, some people will find it absolutely unacceptable. And that's what we're seeing playing out. It's a conflict between faith and science. But of course, when there's this kind of conflict, we know that that of faith is being propagated, by the religious adherents. That of science is being promoted by government. But in this kind of situation, one will have expected that, the side of government will prevail over the side of the adherents. But when you see government officials themselves pandering to this faith aspect of it, then it becomes much more problematic. It has been proven all around the world that one sure way to mitigate and interrupt this health crisis, this pandemic, it's avoiding crowds, social distancing, and social hygiene. And epidemiologists have also told us in history that when the last plague burst out in the early part of the 19th century, there were no vaccines. It was only dealt with by behavioral change. And I think that's what we have to come to terms with, behavioral change. And behavioral change, if it includes, being restrained in how we worship God, the time we worship God, I don't see anything wrong with it. After all, the God Almighty that we worship is not going anywhere. He's still there for us. He sees the problem that we are going through. And he will understand that by the time we are done, irrespective of the inconveniences it's causing for us, to worship, to socialize, by the time we are done with solving our problem, we'll come back to him, and he will have mercy on us. So these are the kind of understanding that I think our leaders should have, but unfortunately, that they are deviating from it. Yeah.
Dr. Adeniyi, well, on that note, let's take a quick commercial break, and then when we return, the conversation will continue. Stay with us.
Dr. Adeniyi, thanks for staying with us while we went on a quick commercial break. Are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, great. Now, before we went on a break, we were talking about the easing of the lockdown across certain northern states. And it's important to also point out, and I think Dr. Abati mentioned this earlier in the show, that the statement that was given by the Sultan of Sokoto also pointed out that it's not a compulsory Muslim activity. And he also said that it shouldn't be observed if it undermines the purpose of Sharia, which is ultimately multifaceted security, personal, community, environmental, etc. But still on the conversation of the North, we also got reports that the North accounts for 54% of all cases of coronavirus recorded in Nigeria so far, and 70% of new infections in Nigeria. Now, there are also fears that Kano may actually be the epicenter of West Africa, not just even the second epicenter, as it's being called, of Nigeria. How do you react to these figures that we're seeing from the North? Of course, given what we are also seeing with the easing of the lockdown suggestions for this weekend.
Yeah, Leila, I think the figures overall are becoming worrisome. Even the patterns, too, can be very disturbing, not just within Nigeria, but on a global scale. Yesterday, we had WHO told us that, there was a new high, on a particular day that saw the United States, Brazil, India, and Russia coming up with some uncomfortably high numbers. So these numbers keep shifting, these statistics keep evolving, and of course it's reflecting in Nigeria as well, where we are seeing this kind of pattern where, we are seeing a concentration in a particular part of the country. It can be very difficult to place a hand on it, really, but of course it cannot be too far from the level of consciousness, the absence of awareness, and sometimes the deliberate refusal of some people, to accept that there's a problem at hand. You might want to call these, deliberate ignorance. Information has been thrown at you, awareness, has been brought to you. You have been sensitized, but you just refuse to. You just condition your belief away from, away from what the truth should be. So this is a problem, and that's why we're saying earlier that government could probably change its communication tactics. It's okay, to go guerrilla, because even in warfare, the enemy sometimes deploy guerrilla tactics to surprise you, to strike at you and to destabilize you. So in communication as well, it's a marketing communication strategy, if I may, and we can adopt it in the management of communication in this process. And that's why we're saying that our messages should be multiple. They should come through different channels and haul it at the people at times they are not expecting, in the mornings, in the evenings, at street corners, and everywhere. Haul it at them such that it could strike their psychology, and they begin to appreciate and probably shape their imagination and begin to appreciate that something is touching them like pain on the body of a human being. Because the mass of the people, in a particular section are less educated, and we need to help them away from themselves. We do not have to say, okay, it is their problem, they want to die. No, that's not the responsibility of the state. That's not the function of government. Government is supposed to protect all, whether you know or you do not know, whether you are an illiterate or you are illiterate, or whether you are conscious or you are not conscious. That's what I think government should be doing, really. We need to scale up our communication, diversify our strategy beyond these elitist, majesty of press conferences every day. Those ones are good, all right, but we need to multiply our channel of communication, and our messages should also be mixed and much more creative than it is. Back to you, Dr. Bati and Leila.
Yes, Dr. Adeniyi, let's talk about elections in the time of COVID-19. Now, on Tuesday, there was a presidential election in Burundi, and that has been widely condemned because Burundi would seem not to have been taking the restriction, the lockdown options seriously enough. In Uganda, President Yoweri Museveni says, it will be absolute madness to hold elections in 2021, where he, of course, probably wants to postpone elections so that he can comfortably remain in office for a sixth term. But here in Nigeria, let's come home. INEC has resumed preparations for the elections in gubernatorial elections in Edo and Ondo states. Edo in September, Ondo State on October 10. And many people have expressed concern that, look, we don't have any legal framework for remote voting. And there is no guarantee that, during rallies and the voting itself, that people will observe social distancing. And the question has been asked, is there something INEC knows in terms of the future and whether or not COVID-19 will have disappeared by September or October? But what do you think? How do you think INEC, the Electoral Commission, should handle this situation?
Yeah, Dr. Abati, very valid question. But we know we have a crisis in our hand that has come to interrupt our way of life, our programs, the world over, not just peculiar to Africa. You cited very good examples from Africa. We know that somehow it's also affecting the processes in America, where a presidential election is due for November, and we can see jitters from different quarters, And Nigeria is not going to be different, but do not forget that we also have a constitution to protect. We have a statutory guideline, that INEC has to abide by. But what I see INEC doing in the circumstance is just, to follow the process as much as they can do and await other stakeholders' input, perhaps the higher authority, or the circumstances as it flows out. Will the virus end or will it not end? Are we going to be able to manage it, or are we going to be able to cohabit with it the way we have cohabited with previous pandemics? It is on record that the Spanish flu never disappeared, but man devised a way of managing it. HIV never disappeared as well, but man devised a way of managing it. The coronavirus is here. It's not likely to disappear. We are likely going to devise a way to manage it going forward. Perhaps behavioral change. Perhaps INEC is anticipating that before the elections, before the election day, we will have perfected, how we're able to partner, in parentheses, partner with the virus and continue with our life. So all these things might probably be in the minds of INEC, but see, there are statutory processes. The Constitution is there. The times for these states governors, are lapsing towards the end of this year. There has to be a process to replace them. Pandemic or not, the process has to be kickstarted until perhaps another force majeure, God forbid. But of course, we just hope that something will have to, processes will have to continue to flow until it becomes impracticable for the elections to be held. But what I see happening is that maybe before then, we will have scaled up our ability, our behavior change will have improved. And do not forget, again, that's another area where I think we are looking away from. Changing behavior is not a tea party. We have to get people to agree and get people to come down, to start activating their new learnings. That's the area that I think we're not concentrating on. So it's a multiple approach that we have to adopt, and I think INEC is being foresighted in coming up with programs as it could be. Dr. Baze and Leila.
Certainly, and speaking of behavioral change, it would be great to get more analysis on how you think we're really doing with that. It's something that we speak about a lot, human behavioral change at a time like this. What is your assessment of the way we're adopting to the new normal across all spheres of life right now in Nigeria? We've only got a minute left.
A minute left, okay. Yeah, I think behavioral change is a long-drawn thing, but there are short and long-term approaches. The approach that we need now is the short one, which as well communication is central to. But we have to ramp up our campaign, scale up our campaign, just the way we are scaling up infrastructure, equipment in the area of health. We need to concentrate on this, realize the fact that there's no vaccine for this virus yet. The only thing we can do is to get the people to own the campaign. Now, you can get them to own the campaign if you get them to change their ways. And how do you get them to change their ways? By communicating meaningfully with them. That's the summary I can give, Leila, but I don't know. For now, that's the much I can go, because I'm just mindful so that I will not run out of time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adeniyi.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adeniyi. Thank you for obliging us whenever we call on you.